Welcome to the show. It's Ivy Nation Sports Talk, and it's Friday, and that means Rapid Fire Day. Everybody, get up, get up. It's time to party. Jesse's partying over in Cleveland right now.
I'm just happy it's Friday. This week has felt like it's drug on forever. I got a lot of stuff to get to this weekend, so
Actually been a quick week for me,
for
the most part.
Must be nice. You just had enough things going on that the week went by quick.
Yep. Just juggling on my plates, Salty, thanks for keeping us diligent and on time, as always. Appreciate it. Got a lot to talk about. Is there anything, you don't have to say what it is. Is there anything you're most looking forward to talking about on today's show with all the topics that we have on the Rapid Fire show?
Yeah, I would say that there's one I'm most excited about.
All right. I mean, Tommy, everybody knows the bird's the word. Like, you don't have to tell me the bird's the word. Everybody knows at this point. Don't you know what you heard? Do you remember that? Did you ever see that on Family Guy when he did that when Peter was bouncing around doing the bird?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to start with some Notre Dame football since that went over real well. Andre asked us the other day what 3 questions we would ask Marcus Freeman if given the opportunity. So that's what we're going to start with today. We each came up with a list of 3 questions. It was easier for some than others. You have 3 questions. I have 3 questions. I will say, I consciously spent time yesterday kind of knowing it was coming up today, trying to think, and I just couldn't think of anything. And then all of a sudden I just stopped thinking, and within 15 minutes, 3 different questions popped into my head. So we'll see. And there were actually a couple more that I left off the list, since I'm not like you. I don't say 3 and then make it 63. So
well, let me ask you this. Are yours do all of yours follow under the same umbrella? Are all of yours specifically football related questions, maybe a personal question, a life question, kind of a more lighthearted, just general question, I guess? Or where do you kind of? I tried to have a variety. I have one kind of specific to football.
Mine are all football.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I didn't go off the beaten path into the personal stuff. So I think it's good if you've got some of that. That'll kind of mix this list up a little bit and probably make sure we don't have anything duplicate. I'll be curious to see if we have anything that is even close to each other's on the list, since we haven't compared lists. Fire away. What's the first question that you've got?
So first question I have is just kind of, I guess this would fall under, coaching style umbrella. And I just want to know who Marcus Freeman thinks has influenced him the most as a head coach. Whose style does he mirror? Who's someone that he looks up to? Feels like someone that's kind of in football, you talk about coaching trees, right? All these guys that kind of are part of different coaching trees. Whose game does he truly kind of idolize, look up to, kind of coach in a similar fashion type situation? So I just think it would be cool to understand, who Marcus Freeman, kind of the brain inside of Marcus Freeman, because then you can see kind of maybe why he's making certain decisions or what he's trying to accomplish maybe.
Yeah, I like how 3 people chime in with the answer. And I mean, it does feel like Jim Tressel has, because that was Freeman's college coach and all that, has had a very big impact. But you could probably even change the question and say, besides Jim Tressel,
right,
another coach, who has maybe played, a big part in who you are as a coach. Feels like Tressel, though, quite a bit. And obviously Freeman's pro career wasn't really long. So I would doubt that it would be anybody on that side. But I would imagine just, some of it also comes from probably, he talks about his parents quite a bit, like the dad with the Air Force background and stuff like that. And obviously his mom, like even though that it might not be specific to coaching, I would think that they played a big part in just sort of his overall, sort of makeup, mentality, philosophy, that kind of thing. But I think that's a good one.
I'm imagining like there's certain parts of his game, in studying film, kind of that sort of stuff, where he's picked up some things along the way. I just don't imagine it's kind of, all of Jim Tressel at the end of the day.
Yep. Okay. Good starter. What's number 2 on your list?
Oh, I thought you were going to go next.
I'll go ahead and give mine if you want. This is in no particular order, so I didn't like put them like this is the most important question.
Same.
2, 3. So these are just 3 questions that I came up with. So the one that I'll start with: how do you weigh experience versus talent / upside? Like you can apply this, like when you're making decisions on, who's going to play, and you can apply this to the quarterback position, where obviously CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey, a lot of talent, less experience than Steve Angeli. They're the 2 guys left on the roster. You can apply it to the left tackle position last year, where Anthony Knapp, true freshman, ended up being the starter all season, with the exception of the national championship game, obviously because of the injury, over a much more veteran Tosh Baker. You can also apply it to a guy like Jalen Sneed, like who came in with a lot of stars next to his name, a lot of talent, and didn't necessarily find his way on the field right away, much to the chagrin of many other guys, because you had guys like JD Bertrand and Kaiser and Maris Leofau out there. So how do you weigh when you're making a lot of these decisions, putting together your starting, not just your starting lineup, but your 2 deep, the experience versus the talent and upside?
No, I think that's a great question, because I think it's something that, is a reoccurring theme every year in the decision-making process, and something that seems to get the fans kind of divided, right? You're usually on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe understanding, maybe the quote unquote formula behind it, where it kind of tips the scale. What is that point where the talent outweighs experience, and you're more comfortable with the experience, compared to the upside at the time. So
and look, the other side of this is the previous head coach much more heavily leaned into the experience than the current head coach, right? Like when a lot of these decisions have been made, like Brian Kelly played it much safer and, went with the, I'm more comfortable, with this guy because he's got more experience. He's been around a little bit versus the guy who might be a bit more talented. Whereas Marcus Freeman, in what we've seen of him so far, has been the opposite of that. All right. So what's your next question?
So my next question is a little bit more fun, and I'll save my more football-related question for last.
Okay.
Marcus Freeman always seems like someone who's on the go. He's very well put together in terms of, like, he's still in kind of peak male performance. It looks like a guy who works out a lot consistently. So I just want to know, say he's not recruiting, he's not coaching, and he has like, a meal to himself. What is his cheat day meal? What does he
nice.
like to
when he's not out there? When he's not out there working on the guns,
yeah,
the pecs.
Is it a rack of ribs? Is it a whole pizza? Is it, like, I just want to know one meal, kind of what that is for Marcus Freeman. What he likes to get down with.
Have you seen some of the like the NFL Combine video of Marcus Freeman?
Yeah, I have.
When he's got the shaved head, and
he looks much different.
He was. I mean, obviously, he was playing linebacker at that point. Like he was much thicker. Like in the chest, you could tell that he was throwing some iron around back then. I mean, he's throwing some iron around now.
His forehead looked bigger for some
reason.
Too.
I know. It's like, hey, what you got going on there? I don't know. I think that's a good one, though. Ian Tenzin says it's carrot cake with a couple scoops of vanilla ice cream. That'd be right up your alley.
I
You'd
do
go to
like
town
some
on
carrot
that.
cake. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that could be on that list. A cheeseburger, a platter of sushi. Like we could make a lot of different things happen.
for sure. All right, so Jesse went with the cheat day meal. I like that. Good route to go. My next question would be, why is wide receiver development so much different, it seems like, than other positions? Because doesn't it seem like that to you? Like kind of back to what we were talking about, experience versus talent and upside. Like pick your wide receiver, Tobias Merriweather. From the minute the guy stepped on the campus, like everyone thought that he was supposed to be on the field right away. But it took a little time, Now, like Micah Gilbert is the next one. Cam Williams is the next one. And you can go back well before that. Like pick your wide receiver. If they, were a highly touted wide receiver coming into Notre Dame, everyone had expectations that they were going to get on the field right away. Hasn't always necessarily worked out that way. Just in just a few instances, it actually has worked out that way. So why does it seem like wide receiver development is so much different than other positions?
I think it's a valid question because of the limitations that the wide receiver position has kind of put on the team, the last definitely since Marcus Freeman has been here and maybe a little bit before that. So, is it just a Notre Dame issue? Is it, specific to their overall thought process or philosophy on offense? Like what have they identified, kind of what is the common denominator in this whole situation? Because they're not doing it on either end. They're not producing guys or bringing in guys with the experience factor who are producing on the field, and they don't have a guy, of recent that has started off that they've kind of fully developed and has turned into a stud kind of wide receiver. We're all hoping that's going to be Greathouse, right? Like that feels like that's what this season should be for him if Notre Dame is kind of back on track in terms of this wide receiver development. So I think it's a very valid question, but I think Marcus Freeman would say kind of like the best is to come, just knowing Marcus Freeman.
Can't get focused thinking about yesterday. You got to be thinking about the future. Just as long as you work hard to get to where you're going every day, you're going to get there. Yeah, I mean, but look, again, Freeman and his staff have shown that they're willing to play freshmen. Like they're not worried about what year you are. Just, like look at the two instances last year with Anthony Knapp and then Leonard Moore. Now, to some extent, Moore was thrown into the fire, but obviously he showed that, he was more than ready to do the job. So maybe that's not even a good example, but like in the short time that Marcus Freeman has been the head coach in his 3 years, doesn't matter what year you are. If they think you can do it, like KVA, another great example, like there's another guy who got out there and played considerably as a freshman. If you can do it, they're more than willing to get you on the field, but it still feels like, probably with the exception of Rico Flores, and that's a whole different probably conversation in itself, with his wide receiver coach and the guy who recruited him, both him and Chancey Stuckey out the door after that freshman season. But, receivers have still been the one, it feels like, that like there's still much more to it than just being a talented guy, So what is it? What gives? Why is it so much different? Yep. Okay, so what's your third and final question then for Marcus Freeman?
So I want to know, I kind of have two questions, but
you used your cheat code. Go ahead. Throw them in here. Do the double. Do like a bad media job and throw two questions into one. Go ahead.
Yes, and they kind of relate to each other. So I would just want to know, since being head coach at Notre Dame, and this might be a little bit more of a topical question, but that's fine. But like, what would he say has been the hardest part of being a head college football coach, and especially at Notre Dame? And like, not as, like an easy surface level question, like actual thought of just the everyday, mechanics of what it takes to be a head coach, the recruiting, the watching film, the being at practice, the being at work. Like, what is the hardest part of all of that? at the end of the day. And I don't want like a, oh, nothing's hard at the end of the, like, I want him to actually say
it's only as hard as you make it,
like what he like, because as someone who admires what it takes to be a head coach, in college or the NFL, like it would be cool to know what he views as the hardest grind of the job at the end of the day.
Yeah, like is it recruiting? Is it the day-to-day, like the game?
Or is it something that like we might not be thinking about?
Yeah, is it like, other stuff that has nothing to do with coaching, like alumni and, like the glad handing and, those kind of things that comes with being a head coach, especially at a place like Notre Dame.
Maybe juggling the relationships with all of the parents.
That's another valid one. Like, I wonder, and this is not exclusive to him. It doesn't feel like too many head coaches are going to be willing to tell you what the hardest part of anything is.
Because then it kind of looks bad on the organization potentially.
Right.
So I'd want to ask
because the first words out of Marcus
doors.
Freeman's mouth might just be, "Well, I chose hard by taking this job."
Exactly. So like, I want to know, not then like knowing that this wouldn't go out to anyone else, right? Like me and Marcus Freeman are having a conversation.
You're sitting down one-on-one, no microphones. This is off the record, just straight up. What's the hardest?
Just
part
a room with 2 chairs, and we're sitting in it and having a conversation.
2 dudes eating carrot cake and vanilla ice cream.
So then the second part of this
wheels out his cheat meal, and then you get to ask the good questions.
Yeah, we have a meal together as we're dining on this cheat meal and having a conversation.
All right. So you get a bonus now. What's your last one?
So my bonus question would be, what has, outside of the loss to, in the national championship to Northern Illinois,
Marshall,
to Stanford, what's been the lowest low?
The way that the Ohio State game ended at Notre Dame Stadium a couple years ago. Like,
you could probably still put that on the table, because I don't want to put like bad losses out there, because I think those are the low hanging.
Well, it sounded like that's what you were doing. I was trying to go along the lines of Stanford. Yeah, forgot about Stanford.
So like take away kind of those low hanging fruit. Like what's kind of been his kind of maybe rock bottom, quote unquote, low point, and then the counter to that would be, what's been your highest high so far? Like what has just given you that extreme adrenaline rush where like you just felt like you could go back out there and run on the field?
The lowest low and the highest high.
Yep.
That's good. I like that. I think that's actually a really good one. Especially since it's only been 3 years so far. And there have been, like you swung the pendulum last year. I would still imagine NIU is the lowest of lows, because you lost that game at home coming off Texas A&M and all that kind of stuff. But then, you beat Georgia and Penn State in back-to-back weeks and played in a national championship.
Got to host a playoff game in front of everyone to open up the entire, playoff. First time anyone's ever hosted a game. I can't imagine what the locker room was like after the IU game. As they went on, they probably just got even.
You mean the greatest atmosphere in the history of Notre Dame Stadium?
Correct. That's what we're officially trademarking it.
That's right. All right, my last question. How collaborative is the process of deciding the starters?
Like how much input does he actually take in?
Right. How much is the position coach? Because it feels like the position coach is the one who gets the blame for all of this stuff. But how much of it is the position coach? How much is, the coordinator, offensive or defensive? And how much then does the head coach chime in on that kind of thing? How collaborative is that? Is the head coach just, if we've kind of got a stalemate, does he sort of move the scale a little bit and, kind of make the final call? Or is it all, pretty much position coach? Or, like how much of the position coach and the coordinator even like involved in that stuff? Because there's a lot of, and there's obviously a very polarizing one, just look at the offensive line, right? Like that's going to be what happens on the offensive line, and what's happened on the offensive line the last couple of years have been fairly controversial. But
So you're
I'm
telling me
curious, how collaborative is that?
you want Marcus Freeman to put up a PowerPoint with a pie chart showing everyone's piece of the pie
Yeah,
in terms of who's making decisions around
right.
here.
If you were the head coach, how collaborative, how much a part of that process would you be? Would you be, the guy who's going to just let his assistants, feel confident, empower your assistants, let them make that call? Or how much do you want to be involved in that?
I'm too much of a control freak at the end of the day.
See, and it feels like most coaches are, right?
Well, I also think that if things
Because
go wrong, you want to take the responsibility of what goes right or wrong.
exactly. And your name is on the marquee.
Right.
It's not, like as the head coach, your name is always on the marquee. And so whether it's game time decisions, go for it on fourth down, whatever it happens to be, like your name is up there.
At the end of the day, it's your gut decision,
Right.
know? And if that's what it is, like let me put it like this. If the whole pie is 100%, I'm minimum threshold, I'm 70% of that pie.
I could see that. And I think a lot of coaches would want to be that.
Yeah.
Like if I'm sitting there and if I'm the head coach and I'm watching film with, my coordinators and position coaches and whatever it might be. And, and like I see something specific, regardless of what position it is. And then I'm like, is he really the best guy for this job right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, coach, I was watching a lot of film last night, and I think we need to go this way.
Yeah.
So the other part of it is shoot, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me.
Like another question, or
no, it was kind of off of what we were just talking about.
Head coach chiming in, collaborative.
Yeah. It lost me.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. Well, I don't see Andre in the chat, but we did that for Andre. He asked us that question in the mailbag the other day, and we said, hey, probably need a little bit of time to come up, with questions of quality. So I'm glad you came up with carrot cake, and we spent a good chunk of time talking about that. So let's move on a little bit. Since Notre Dame and Clemson announced their 12-year series this week, we've talked a bit about schedules and future opponents. Do you have any desire to see Notre Dame and Indiana play more regularly in either football or, and I'll expand this, men's or women's basketball?
So I more so like this on the basketball side of things. The only reason I'm hesitant on the football side of things is because, Indiana's been good at football for exactly one season, and so putting them on this, this continuous schedule after one good season, I think is just not going to lead to anything good down the road. It's just not going to have any longevity to it. I don't foresee Indiana good like this again in 6 years from now, right? And so the last thing you want to do is get into a relationship with something that's just not going to be good year 10, year 15 down the road. Now it's just another, nasty game on the schedule that no one looks forward to. So basketball, I think that Indiana has more of obviously a rooted tradition, and there's more going to be general excitement about, IU playing Notre Dame because it is in-state, and because I think, Indiana itself is more, overall, it is a basketball state. And so I think you get a lot of people more naturally interested to go between, Bloomington and Indiana, and there be more kind of the excitement because, IU is good. And so I think as Notre Dame fans, it'd be fun to play a school that has more rooted tradition in basketball.
I don't disagree with that. I will say, when it comes to football specifically, I agree with what you're saying. And this was a Champions Lounge thread. I think it's still up there on the lounge. Like people have been talking about, do you want to see Indiana play? My macro answer is no. I think it's okay. It's nice. They've got a home and home. Remember what I said before it even ended up being Indiana at the end of the season, before the college football playoff, the rankings and the pairings and all that stuff came out. No offense, IU fans, but you're obnoxious. I realize there are sections of every fan base that are obnoxious, but I told everybody the IU fans were going to be obnoxious, and that's all you heard. Like, they thought they were going to come up here and kick Notre Dame's brains in, right, in that game, and that didn't happen. But all that said, let me just throw this at you.
Throw it at me.
You can say that you heard it here first, okay? Maybe, could be just once, could be once every 4 or 5 years. They used to do the Crossroads Classic down in Indianapolis, right?
Right.
Where it would be like you would have Notre Dame would play Indiana, and then Purdue would play Butler. And then the next year, Notre Dame would play Purdue, Indiana would play Butler. So, they did that in men's basketball down in Indianapolis. They got rid of it a couple of years ago. People have talked about the Shamrock Series at Lucas Oil, which they've done once against Purdue. So picture this, right? It's November. College basketball season has started. College football season is still going on. November, Indianapolis, Saturday at Lucas Oil, Shamrock Series. You've got Notre Dame and Indiana in football. Sunday at Gamebridge Fieldhouse, you've got a men's and women's doubleheader, IU versus Notre Dame, both men's and women's. So it's like a Shamrock takeover of Indianapolis. 2 days. What do you think about that?
I think that's one of the best ideas you ever had. I'd be there all weekend. I was getting pretty hyped up listening to the sales pitch.
And I mean, you could do it with Purdue if you wanted to, but I feel like in terms of like quality of games, I think Notre Dame
here.
And like, and Marquee and the whole thing, like, I feel like Shamrock takeover of Indianapolis Saturday, or you could even do it like Thanksgiving weekend. Play the football game on Black Friday, play the basketball games on Saturday.
Yes. Let me ask you what's more annoying, Purdue football fans or Indiana basketball fans?
Ooh, I haven't had to deal with Indiana basketball fans in a long time, but Purdue, I will just say, when Notre Dame and Purdue football were playing regularly, it was just nasty, obnoxious, even beyond big dumb drums and all that stuff. I just did not like that series. I just didn't like it. Purdue football fans specifically, just flat out nasty toward Notre Dame. And they would, fill up half the parking lot out there when we played at Notre Dame Stadium. So,
no, I think this is a great idea. I think.
Okay, well, it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving weekend. I forgot about the state championship games. So don't do it Thanksgiving weekend. Do it the week before Thanksgiving. Go ahead.
There could be a weekend where this Saturday and Sunday doubleheader can all coincide.
Right.
And with that general kind of blueprint of a plan, it's just, how could you say no? Like, as the state of Indiana, when you're talking about the best things in the state of Indiana sports-wise, it's Notre Dame football and Indiana basketball.
Right.
And you bring them all together in the state's capital that can host Super Bowls, NFL Final Four. You have the capacity, and everyone's in driving distance. Every hotel is going to fill up. I wasn't just kind of, blowing smoke here. I think it's a great idea.
When this came to me, I tell you, I felt like this is pretty good.
Kind of touching it with this. It's hot.
DJ said I almost had him. Come aboard, DJ. Come aboard. And the Notre Dame and IU women, it's like they've played, but they don't play very often. Obviously,
and IU women has been pretty solid the last.
They've both been
handful of years
tournament teams, so that would be like a really competitive game, most likely.
Early out of conference game.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, you could do something like this in November in different cities with a lot of different schools as well. You could even do, you could still do it in Indianapolis because Columbus isn't that far from Indianapolis. You could do it with Ohio State. Again, you could do it with Purdue. You could go up to Detroit and do it with one of the Michigan schools. You could go over to Cleveland. There's a lot of different, like Shamrock takeover. Football on Saturday, men's and women's basketball doubleheader on Sunday.
I think you need to find Pete Bavacqua's number. And
Trademark that. You heard it here. Shamrock Takeover. DJ says he's on board for the basketball games, but not the football. Again, like this would be like a one-time, very special. I think it would be like, especially with Indiana, I think it would be really cool down there to Indianapolis to do something like that, because
there's a lot of fans of both.
Yeah, there's a lot of fans of both, and you've got a somewhat major airport, so you've got easy access for all the Notre Dame fans, because you'd have more Notre Dame people flying in for that than you probably would Indiana, since Indiana's a state school, and you wouldn't have to worry as much about hotel rooms for them and that whole thing. But I think that would be like a really cool kind of event to have that many fans of both teams down. It would kind of be like a Final Four type weekend with that many fans of both teams in there, with three different sports playing. All right. So moving on, some more schedule stuff. With the addition of Clemson to the schedule starting in 2027, here are some of the premier opponents Notre Dame will face in each season during the 12-year stretch. 2028, you've got home games against Clemson, Texas, and Miami. That's one of the better home slates you're ever going to find. 2029, home against Alabama, on the road against Clemson and Texas. 2030, home against Clemson, on the road against Alabama and Florida State. 31, home against Florida and Miami, on the road against Clemson. 2032, Clemson and Florida State at home, Florida Gators and Miami on the road, and then 2034, home against Michigan and Clemson, road against Miami. So none of that includes USC, because as of now, this year and next year, the last 2 years on the Notre Dame USC contract. So when you look at those schedules, does it feel like Notre Dame is planning on USC being in the mix going forward?
It does not feel like they plan on them being in the mix going forward, because if they were, you would have potentially, I mean, there's years where, 2032, half of your schedule could potentially be top 25 teams, and even higher than that, maybe even top 15, so.
Yeah, because that's not even accounting for, there's going to be a couple ACC teams that are going to end up being ranked when you play them.
And so, I feel like locking down a program like Clemson for the next 10 years with the USC contract on the table, like a wet fish, just kind of, flapping out of water, running out of air. It just feels like naturally that this is kind of the security blanket. And, honestly, if it's to this point and nothing's been done, that Notre Dame has had to have conversations before. They're not just going to let this thing, die out to the end and then try to get it done in the last second. Like, you have to plan ahead, and when these things are going on in terms of your schedule and, how far, you're master planning your schedule out so far in advance, and you can't be sitting here waiting around to see if USC is going to, commit to extending this thing. So I definitely feel like this is like, if we're, where we're at, I feel like I'm at a 7 out of 10 of USC not being a part of the schedule going forward at this.
That's sure how it feels to me. Again, like when you look at it and you break it down like that, and you see like this is like we're going back to, like pre probably 2010-ish type scheduling. Where like those years where you still had Purdue and Michigan State, and remember Purdue was decent there for a while when old Grandpa Joe Tiller was still around, but you had like Purdue, who was decent for a while, like with Kyle Orton and Drew Brees before that. And then, Michigan State and Michigan were both formidable opponents. Like this is like this kind of scheduling. And obviously you still had USC on the schedule every year as well. So like looking at this with not even having USC on there, it sure feels to me like the plans are like USC's not going to be in the picture, because it doesn't feel like you're going to play, Alabama and Clemson and Florida Well, that's not in the same year. 2032 specifically. Clemson, Florida State, Florida, and Miami. 3 Florida schools and Clemson all in the same year. Or 2028. Doesn't feel like you're going to play Clemson, Texas, and Miami all in the same year if you're also planning on USC being there. Same in 29 when you've got Alabama, Clemson, and Texas all together. It just doesn't feel like, that's kind of what your plans are going to be. Now, speaking of which, I just heard back RJ Abatia, who I've had on over the years. He covers USC. Just texted me back, and he's going to be on the show on Tuesday. And good news for all you live freaks, he's going to be live at 5 o'clock. So kind of expecting a lot from you nincompoops. No, I'm joking, but I'm kind of expecting a lot because you always want these guys to be live instead of pre-recorded. So don't come with, just like ho-hum comments. Come with actual questions if you have questions.
Bring the juice.
Because no, I just said I am Tenzin. It is going to be live. He is going to be live at 5 o'clock next Tuesday.
Bring the juice.
So bring real questions for the USC writer, RJ, next Tuesday, live at 5 o'clock. Write that down. Live at 5.
At least it rhymes. Live at 5.
That's right. Do any of those years, one more thought on this, do any of those years feel like adding Clemson might be like one game too many?
Yes. 2029, Texas and Alabama is tough considering where Texas is at, and I think Alabama is still a good program, and I think they're going to continue to get better under DeBoer. So that's going to be a tough year. And then the year that you're playing the whole state of Florida, 2032, is also going to be a bit of a tough year. I mean, the thing is about when you're playing, which is crazy that they're playing Florida State, Florida, and Miami all in the same season.
I know.
But my thing with that is we just don't know. Like Florida, I feel like Florida State, I mean, all 3 of these programs, besides Clemson, are just so erratic.
No, and that's the thing. It's a crapshoot. So there's no guarantee that all 3 of them, or even any of them, are all going to be good. But the odds are you're going to get at least 2 of them that are probably going to be pretty good, right?
That's what you're hoping for. And so
right.
I think if you're looking at that rationale, the one I'm really only concerned about is the year you got Alabama and Texas on there.
Yeah.
Because exactly. I know in 2029, all 3 of those schools are probably going to be pretty freaking good. Pretty solid programs going on.
Good chance. Assuming all the head coaches, I mean, that's only 4 years from now. So like you're going to assume that, I mean, all 3 of those coaches have made it to the college football playoff, like in the last couple of years, because obviously DeBoer was at Washington still. And, Dabo was just there, won national championship. So like that looks very formidable. But at the same time, like when you consider the brutal home schedule that they just played, and you look at some of these home games, again, like you can see why you've got a former TV executive and an NBC, NBC just gave you a lot of money on that contract, and that's going to help you stay independent going forward, like to give them a little bit of juice, a little bit of squeeze in that juice there, for the home schedule going forward. Oh, they're coming at you now. Sly Fox is coming at you. Breaking news: Notre Dame moves Boise State game to Sunday, October 5th due to big in-house wedding, October 4th. It's all because of you.
You're welcome.
But I'm looking forward to RJ coming up next Tuesday. Again, he's like someone to talk to. He started his career. He's a Stanford grad. He started his career covering Stanford, and he's probably been at USC now for around 4 or 5 years. I remember right after the news started breaking, that USC was going to leave the Pac-12 to go to the Big Ten. We had RJ on and talked to him. And then a couple of years ago, I think it was the year after that, when Lincoln Riley started complaining about having Notre Dame on the schedule, we talked to him about that. So we'll have plenty to talk about with RJ, especially when you throw in the whole Chad Bowden part of this deal now. Okay, so some interesting comments from Urban Meyer, I thought, this week. Urban Meyer said this on the Triple Option podcast about college coaches who lie to the NCAA.
Lie as a college football coach to the NCAA, in my personal opinion, you're finished. You're done. That's not making a text message. That's not, going to lunch someone with you're not supposed to go to lunch with. That's not you send a letter when you're not supposed to. That, all the frivolous division or level 3s and all that nonsense. When they got you and they said, did you do this? And they refused to cooperate or they lie, in my very strong opinion, you're finished coaching in Division I college football or basketball, whatever sport. Guess what happens? The risk now is too high, and I don't think you ever see this kind of stuff again. I've said that before. Des Bryant, why is Des Bryant treated more harshly than coaches that maybe lied to the NCAA? I've asked that question many times. If this guy's not telling the truth, why is he coaching? He's done.
Yeah.
You're finished. I know you're finished coaching if you lie to the NCAA.
Finished coaching if you lie to the NCAA. Do you buy or sell that?
Oh, this is tough. Can I remove? Can I remove who said it?
That's my biggest problem. I have a lot of problems taking words of advice on morals, anything that deals with morals.
That's where I'm at.
From Urban Meyer. So
can I just take it on the principle itself? If we're talking about principle itself,
right.
This is
who's saying it, yeah.
And I also think it's a direct shot from him at Michigan because he
absolutely
wants the national championship to be taken away.
Absolutely, because he can't even say Michigan. It's TUM or TUN, Team Up North. That's
right.
how they refer to him. So yeah. I am Tenzin. Wow, he made a good point. BD would call us, okay. He can call me hypocritical all I want. How am I being hypocritical when Urban Meyer is being hypocritical because he's the least moral person, and that's been proven by his own actions? So how am I being hypocritical about it? But I guess I would be in. I would buy what he's selling. I just don't like Urban Meyer being the poster child for this.
Yeah.
I can dislike the messenger, but like the message, right? To the point. That doesn't make me hypocritical because Urban Meyer is a bigger hypocrite than I think probably most of us here. So that's the only issue, is that Urban Meyer is the one saying it. But yeah, look, that's. And I agree with what you're saying as well, that, Irma just wants to see Michigan have its title stripped, because that irks him as well. But yeah, I'm totally in on the concept. If it's proven that you're lying to the NCAA, why should you be allowed to coach anymore? At the very least, you should get some kind of suspension. Kellen, the Houston basketball coach, Kellen Sampson, he was barred from college basketball for several years for far less than lying to the NCAA. Now, he may have lied to the NCAA, now that I think about it, because of the whole, recruiting and texts and all that kind of stuff that was going on down there. But yeah, I think at the very least, a couple years suspension, a lifetime ban might be a little bit too much, but I would be in on some kind of multi-year suspension if you're caught lying to the NCAA.
Think about what happens if you lie in court, or if you lie to your boss, or if you lie to the FBI or the police. If you lie to any of those high, powerful governing bodies who are trying to regulate and promote the most, lawful and honest, regulation of play, then yeah, how can you be trusted within the NCAA? I don't believe that. And especially if you're doing very shady things, you're only lying if you're doing bad things. No one just lies over, like Urban said, text messages or that, like when you're lying about big deal things that have, heavy implications, then yes, I do believe that you should be suspended from coaching. Have your coaching license revoked.
Beefeater, if we could hand out awards for comments, I think Beefeater would probably win the day. All right, two-time defending national champion Notre Dame men's lacrosse opens NCAA tournament play this Sunday against Ohio State. Do you buy or sell the season as a disappointment if they don't win another national championship?
I have to be a sell on this. You can't expect teams to win national championships every year, and you can't expect teams to three-peat. As long as Notre Dame makes a push and plays well, it's the thing that I can't excuse is when you play sloppy or beat yourself along the way. If you play well and it's a hard-fought game and both sides are playing really well, then yeah, you can stand a loss. But I would be upset, and I would be more of a buy if they just completely underperformed or played down to their level, had like a NIU type loss or a Stanford type loss, if we were kind of making a comparison. So I don't think that the expectation should be a three-peat.
No, I agree with this. I agree. I'm selling it as well. I just thought that I would kind of throw it out there. Interesting. They played Ohio State once this year. They only lost by 1 point. They've got 4 losses. 2 of them are by 1 point. The other one was by 2 points in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. So, like, this is a team, despite the fact that it's got 4 losses, has been in virtually every game that they've played. But, look, you can't keep winning national championships forever, right? That's why I thought that this would at least be interesting. Because of the fact that you're the 2-time defending national champion, would it be a disappointment if you didn't win again? Sooner or later, that streak's got to end. But I agree with Tenzin. It's Ohio State. Everyone wants to see them even much more so beat Ohio State in this first round of the NCAA tournament. But I wouldn't put it past them to make a little bit of a run. Like Tenzin's saying, they're 8-4 though. But again, like 2 losses by 1 point, the other by 2 points. They've been in all 3 of them. So fill in the blank. The NBA is returning to NBC next season, and it's blank that NBC is going to bring back the Round Ball Rock theme song from their 90s NBA coverage. They're also going to use AI to recreate the voice of Jim Fagan, who was the voiceover artist who did the narration for NBC's original NBA coverage.
One word, electric. And I think that's exactly what the NBA is looking for right now, a way to, kind of bring back that nostalgia and pump up some energy back into the NBA from maybe fans of the past or, a fan base that they might not have tapped into quite yet. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think it's really exciting. And it's part of an era where I didn't really watch basketball. So kind of seeing that fusion of, me growing up, a lot of TNT, Charles Barkley, Shaq, Ernie, that whole crew, and now combining it with some of these themes and effects from NBC, just seeing where it goes. I like that it's something, again, that's taking some nostalgia from the past, we're putting it into the current and seeing how it's going to go.
Basketball, give me the ball because I'm gonna dunk it. I had never seen that SNL skit before, and then I saw it today. I had heard about it, and I went and found it. I sent it to you. Had you ever seen that before?
I had not seen it before.
It is Vince Vaughn. They're supposed to be like executives at NBC, and Vince Vaughn is the guest host, and Jason Sudeikis and another guy comes in, and they're auditioning their song for NBC, and it ends up being Round Ball Rock. But yeah, like, to the point, it is obviously very nostalgic. I think electric is another word, because like I've been a little bit more lukewarm. It's like, okay, great, so you're going back to Round Ball Rock. Is that is that really
when you hear that, what do you immediately think of?
You think of NBA basketball. You think of like the NBA game of the week and the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing aren't walking back in the door. Like, that's when they played that song. So like, I guess, is it going to like they're laying the nostalgia on thick? Is it going to get people to actually watch
Is it gonna
just
land?
because of the song? Yeah.
Is it gonna stick?
Had you ever heard of the song though? Had you ever
I
heard
have
of the song?
heard it. I've
You
not.
didn't know that was it?
No, I knew that it was associated with basketball. I've just not. I didn't know when it was from. I just knew it was a thing. Maybe I guess
Yeah.
is the best way to put it.
I guess Fox College basketball has been using it on their basketball coverage for a while, which is interesting.
Would you
But,
pay for a strictly Shaq and Charles Barkley just commentary throughout the game, like they're just kind of casually, like doing what they do in the studio, but then they're also throwing in kind of their analysis of the game at the same time?
I don't know if I'd pay for it, but like as an
Would you watch
broadcast, I would probably watch that.
Like the NBA's version of the Manning cast, maybe.
Although Shaq, sometimes I wonder.
He's got to enunciate a little bit better.
Words are going to come out of his mouth. Push it hard. Push it real good.
But then I think it would also lead to them, because sometimes just Charles Barkley and those guys are like, they say they'll Ernie will say someone's name and he's like, who? And it's like, I think it would allow them to at least be more intimate with kind of everything that's going on in the NBA.
If Beefeater says John Tesh wrote it, and that was part of that SNL skit. It was supposed to be John Tesh and his brother, who I guess he doesn't really have a brother, but they were kind of spoofing that. And I was actually listening to him on the SI Media podcast. They had him on to talk all about it, and he talked about a lot of different things. And it really, like, listening to that and listening to him talk about it kind of got me going a little bit. He said he was sitting at home in California when the East Coast feed of that SNL came out, when they were spoofing him and his song, and people, his phone started blowing up and the whole thing. And he's like, what's going on? And, people are telling him he's making fun of him and stuff like that. So he's, they're telling him, watch SNL. And so, he and his wife stay up, they see the skit, and he asked his wife what she thought. And she said, I think it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. And he was like, I think you're right. Because that's literally, I think, when a lot of that, nostalgia for the song started coming back. Now they're going to pay him a boatload of money to use the song on NBC again. So that's it's pretty cool. And he also talked about how he wrote the song. This was like early 90s. He was in France covering the Tour de France, and like this, whatever tune popped into his head, and he didn't have any. This is obviously like pre-cell phones, very, mostly pre-internet and all that kind of stuff. So like he had no way, he had this song in his head. He had no way to record it. So what he did, he called his home and got his voicemail, and he played it, like he had his piano, electric piano or whatever, electric keyboard. He played it in two different parts. The recording ended on the first one. He played the first part. Then he called back again and played the second part so he wouldn't forget it. And then he got home, took it off his voicemail, and put it all together, and it became Round Ball Rock. So I thought that was a really interesting backstory, to how it all came together.
That's how brilliant ideas come together, I feel like.
That's right. Happens sometimes. Speaking of brilliant ideas, the Bill Belichick, Jordan Hudson story.
The sarcasm.
It is the gift that just keeps on giving. On his podcast, Pablo Torre Finds Out. Pablo Torre, they did a whole podcast episode about this Bill Belichick, Jordan Hudson stuff. And you may have seen today that there was, from Pablo Torre's podcast, he talked to 11 total sources, including 2 from the University of North Carolina. And he reported on the podcast that Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, has been banned from the Tar Heel football facility. Well, that prompted North Carolina to release a statement a little bit later denying that report, saying that Jordan Hudson is fully welcome at the North Carolina football facility. So I guess, who do you believe in all this?
I believe a conversation was had where I think there's a division at North Carolina, in the upper powers, I think of who is all on board with this Bill Belichick experiment and who is not. And I think the people on board are putting their foot in the ground and saying, you know what, she's just not allowed, right? And so whether or not the word banned was ever, directly thrown out, because that's a hard word, banned,
Right.
but like maybe restricted to practice or certain facilities, like it's no longer just all access, free range. She can basically be Bill Belichick 2.0. Like there's going to be some restrictions. I don't think the word banned was ever thrown around. And then I think that they wanted to keep this pretty much on the down low or internal.
See, and this is what I believe.
Hit the fan, and then
it gets out.
It doesn't look good that you're saying that someone is banned when it was probably more or less restrictions, and you wanted to kind of keep it more or less hush hush, or at least be the people to bring it out into the light of the world. You didn't want Pablo Torre saying someone is banned on his podcast.
Right. I think if Pablo Torre had never talked to anybody from North Carolina and this had never come out, there probably would have been a pretty, let's keep Jordan out of the football facility as much as possible. And honestly, with the way all of this has gone down in the last 2 weeks since the CBS interview, would you really have put it past Bill Belichick if maybe he even suggested to someone, it's like, hey,
can you ban her?
I wouldn't mind if you said that she's not allowed at the football facility anymore.
I don't have to say it, but you can say it.
That's right. You can say it. You're above me in the food chain. So I fully believe that North Carolina kind of had some kind of plan in place that would have stayed in place if Pablo Torre hadn't talked to somebody and talked about it on his podcast, which just came out. His podcast is called Pablo Torre Finds Out. A lot of interesting stuff that came up in there. Also on the podcast, Torre talked to sources who told him that the reason Hudson didn't want to talk about how she and Belichick met in the CBS interview, like you remember that, we're not talking about that, is what she said. The reason she didn't want to talk about how they met during that CBS interview 2 weeks ago is because she is saving that for exclusive information on a possible future reality TV show. How's that? After the Hard Knocks thing got shut down because she basically wanted to run the show in that. And there's more in there also about how, like the Super Bowl commercial, the Dung Kings commercial, remember where she's standing in the background? She wasn't supposed to be in that. She essentially forced her way into that. And then there's another commercial that Belichick has done for like one of the, like the sports book, whatever. I can't remember which one. Remember the one, is it remember he's on the phone and like someone's calling him, like looking for information, and Belichick's like, yeah, that guy's going to play. I don't think that guy, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So apparently she shows up while that's filming and starts pitching to the producers of the commercial how she needs to be in the commercial. Like Belichick is sitting poolside. And so apparently like they kind of take a break. They had actually done all the filming. So she shows back up in a bikini and a hat ready for her part in the commercial. And so they essentially, had her, put her in place or whatever. And then they roll out cameras and they're not actually even shooting the video. They just basically pretended to shoot the video of her sitting next to Belichick. And then, of course, she never ended up in the commercial either. So the money quote from the Pablo Torre podcast, though, this is a quote that he said he got from one of the sources who he talked to. Quote, "She's the worst person I've ever met, and I've worked with multiple sociopaths." End quote. Yes.
Wow.
So good luck, Belichick.
This is a whole different conversation that I really don't want to open the can of worms on, but did Bill really think this whole thing through? First of all, two, is he really willing to let it dare I say, drag his reputation in the mud a little bit.
Because that's what's going on.
And
right
three,
now.
did he actually accept the position to be the head coach? Or did she, because she knew everything that was about to spin off of this?
Pitch it to get him, because like apparently the book, that he's out there promoting was her idea. Like how much of it was her, just trying to get more attention on her.
Well, how many different avenues it opens up once he takes that job?
Well, and she's also apparently very upset right now because she's like, I think the Miss Maine competition started today that she's in. And she was runner-up in that competition last year. And like, she's mad that all this blowback from the CBS interview was going to cost her chance to be Miss Maine. So,
TD for Indy brings up what I think everyone's going to say. And I guess what I'm thinking is, I just don't think Bill, in the long haul of everything he's accomplished in his career, is just willing to throw it all away for that. And you're still Bill Belichick. Like, it's not like you could move on and probably find someone, if you found one, you could maybe find another, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're still Bill Belichick, rich, and Bill Belichick at the end of the day, like I guess, why is it specific to this one person that he's just continuing to allow himself to be latched onto when it's, again, dragging kind of everything that he has worked through his whole life to kind of be drugged through the mud a little bit.
Yeah, it is crazy. Would you have ever thought that Bill Belichick, this would be?
I never thought he'd be in college, let alone everything else that has come or transpired from this.
I know. And that's, I'm just, because we're what, like 3 months away from the football season started. I can just see a year from now, when football season is over, it's like, it's the Belichicks, Bill and Jordan, whatever, like that's the reality show on E or whatever it happens to be.
Some people are calling it love in the chat.
Okay, so an interesting story out of Boston. Red Sox, of course, signed Alex Bregman this offseason to play third base. When they did that, they told their incumbent third baseman, Rafael Devers, that he was going to be the designated hitter. So last week, Sox first baseman Tristan Casas suffered a season-ending knee injury, and Devers said the team approached him about moving over to play first base, due to that injury, but he doesn't want to do it. So, Jesse, fair or foul? Rafael Devers being a diva.
I think this is comedically fair at the end of the day. And the reason why I think this is so funny is because, a lot of these guys, they don't want to just be in this one lane of I'm a DH. I just show up and be a DH, and that's all I do. And especially when you played a position at a high level, right? And so I imagine in spring training, like most people, Devers took it quite personally, and they made a decision and they basically told him to suck it up and not to whine about it, right?
Right.
And so let me put it like this. If he were approached in spring training, hey, we want you to go out and try out first base, just kind of be there, secondary position. Maybe we transition to you there if Bregman plays full-time at third. I think that's fair. But when you tell a guy he's strictly a DH and to quit crying and to suck it up, and that's just how it's going to be, but then things don't go kind of how you planned and you're 60 games into the season, I don't think it's unjustified to say no at that point.
I don't either.
And you can whine and cry and say,
especially as a professional, it's one thing if you're a college guy or high, whatever. He's a professional athlete.
You're at the pinnacle at this point. You've made it.
They told him what their plan was. Their plan was Alex Bregman's going to come in, take your job at third base. Now you're a DH, don't worry about it. And like, to his point, he said, so what happens if an outfielder gets hurt? Now they're going to ask me to play the outfield too? Or, what's the story here? Like, you had plenty of time to think about this during spring training when Alex Bregman came in. If you were even thinking about, having him over there at first base as a backup, because, guys don't play every day in big league baseball. So even if Casas, had stayed healthy, like, you've got to have another first baseman, and they've got a couple backup first baseman, and that's who they're going to go with now. But you had spring training to get it figured out. So I don't have a problem with him telling him no.
I mean, yeah, it's just you told the guy one thing, and then now, you told him to get used to it. He got used to it, and now things didn't go your way, and you're like, oh, but actually, we kind of do need you to go back and do this, So I don't have any sympathy. And for anyone that says, oh, well, he makes $30 million a year, okay. They're comfortable paying him that to be a DH. So why does he got to play the field now? All of a sudden?
He gets $30 million a year, regardless of what his job description says. And coming into the season, his job description says be the DH.
Be the DH, baby.
Yep.
Maybe at the end of the year, I'll go back to first. You give me $5 more million, and we can renegotiate here a little bit. But for this season, I have no problem with him just being like, I'm the DH. That's what I'm here to do.
Yep, that's right. All right, so as you know, I've got the run of the place to myself this weekend because everyone in the household is going to Columbus.
10, how excited are you for that?
Scale of 1 to 10? It's not like through the roof, but I put it at a solid 8 anyway.
Do you think you'll experience any FOMO along the way?
Probably not.
Okay.
There's a lot of driving involved tomorrow. They're driving to Columbus, Ohio, to be
leaving early,
to be in your bride-to-be's to go to your bride-to-be's bridal shower, and then they're driving back tomorrow night because Sunday is Mother's Day. So that's too much driving in one day for me.
That's a solid 7 hours right there.
I know. Especially, in the van with all that. So I'm thinking about going to a movie this weekend. And the two that I'm thinking about, because there's not a whole lot out, two getting real good reviews. And to be quite honest, I don't think that your mom, I know she definitely would not go to one of them with me. Probably a hard time convincing her to go to the other one as well. So Thunderbolts and Sinners are the two that I'm looking at. You hearing anything one way or the other? You got any advice on this?
Yeah, I do have some advice on this. So I did a little bit of research. First of all, both really high on the Rotten Tomato. 88% for Thunderbolts and 97% for Sinners. And that's when I'm going to movies, that's my scale right there. That's the first thing I look at to see how I'm feeling about the movies. So that's indication one. You picked two good movies. So I appreciate you bringing some good options.
Quality.
To the table.
Okay.
So first of all, Thunderbolts is a Marvel movie. And I didn't know if you if this was something you've heard of before, if you know the main characters of these, the Marvel characters that are going to be.
I know nothing about them. I know nothing about the characters. I think I've been to maybe, I know I saw the original Captain America, and I've been to like a handful of these kind of movies over the years. Yeah, but nothing specific. It feels like this is a little bit more standalone. Like I don't have to know the whole Marvel verse to watch.
So Marvel is kind of starting a new kind of maybe saga, I guess you could say. And so I think that this Thunderbolts is kind of the start of a new long lineage of Marvel movies. And you don't have to have any kind of backstory, at least from my understanding, to kind of, see any of these. But I know for a fact, one of the characters, Bucky Barnes, because we saw the Captain America movie together in theaters when he came out. It was like the Lost Soldier or whatever, and he goes back, and that's kind of him and Captain America are fighting each other. So I know at least one of the characters. I know that's the movie.
So that guy's in it? Captain America's in it then, is what you're saying?
No, not Captain America. The guy, his enemy in one of the movies that we saw is
okay. Okay.
So I know Mom would definitely not go to this movie. So that's first and foremost. And then you move on to Sinners, which is Michael B. Jordan. You get out of the whole kind of Marvel complex, superhero.
Haley Steinfeld, Josh Allen's fiance.
Yes. And so I think in terms of more of a movie, your speed, and this one's more or less about, I believe, two brothers who kind of go back to their hometown in Mississippi and kind of going through, some demons of their past type situation. I think that this is more along of a movie that you would enjoy.
There's some horror. There's some horror in there, from what I understand.
Really,
Yes.
just gruesome violence.
I don't know like the whole plot, but I'm pretty sure there's like some spooky stuff. That's why I'm saying your mom would not be in on this one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's more. I think you would not mind Thunderbolts, but I think that Sinners is more of a movie that plays to your catalog of movies.
More my taste a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it has a freaking 97 on Rotten Tomatoes, so it really can't be that bad.
Archer says it's a vampire movie. See, I didn't realize that.
Really?
Vampire action in there. Like I said, I knew there was some horror, kind of spooky stuff in there.
And the setting is kind of...
But everyone's raving about it. I've heard a lot of good talk about Sinners, so maybe I need to go see it. Get my bucket of popcorn and have at it.
It's set in 1932.
All right. All right. I think that might be the call then. I just might do that. Thanks for breaking it down like that.
I tried my best.
Yeah, I'm still upset, Mark says, about missing out on Snow White. Totally missed that one. All right. Well, if you're a mother, have a great Mother's Day. If you're not a mother, if you are a son or daughter of a mother and you're going to be with your mother, happy Mother's Day to them this weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. The weather around here sounds like it's supposed to be pretty nice. So I won't be driving 7 hours back and forth to Columbus, Ohio.
Going to Columbus tonight.
Be grilling the old steaks on Sunday when everybody gets back into town. All right. Well, appreciate you being here. Have a great weekend. Once again, happy Mother's Day, and we will talk to you next week on Aviation Sports Talk. Hit the like button.